Why is the remake going to suck? Because just by what I'm hearing, they don't understand the family virtues that the film, and by extension the fairy tale, has been trying to promote. So if they don't understand the core virtues that the story is trying to present, and if they don't like the source material, why are they even trying to adapt it? This is the same mentality. This is the same kinds of people who would happily endorse like Rings of Power, even though Rings of Power completely goes off track. Oh, there's a birdie. Completely goes off track with the source material that Tolkien established, all in the name of trying to make it politically relevant. So you've heard the news already, but for those of you who are uninformed, I might as well bring it up again. Disney has been known to be a company that would cash in on certain things from time to time, and in the past decade, over past 15 years, or well, even past several decades, I guess, they've been having this trend of live action remakes for some of the films they've animated in the past. Some of the animated films they've made live action remakes for. And there have been rare occasions where the remakes actually worked, like with Cinderella, and others that could be an arguable case. But for the most part, they're quite shallow remakes, because they don't quite capture that timeless charm that the animated counterparts already established. That's why all the critiques come in. But not all of them have been bad. Like, some of them have actually been pretty good and actually benefited from the new creative update. But lately, Disney has been known for being particularly greedy for making as much money as possible, which has led to trying to buy as many intellectual properties as possible to expand their influence and try to include as broad a demographic as possible. And so they have upped their marketing and their presentation to try to represent as many different minorities as possible. Now, these kind of virtues don't sound bad by themselves. After all, a company of that success has the budget to make anything get the budget it needs to tell the kind of story they want. But the problem is, because they're so obsessed with getting as much money as possible, as well as trying to pander to as much people as possible, their top priority isn't like creative innovation like they had with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs anymore. Now it's just all about trying to make as much money as possible for the sake of making as much money as possible, as well as try to reach out to a broad demographic of people. But in doing so, they sacrifice the family values, they sacrifice the creativity, and they sacrifice any kind of trust with families they've established over the years, all in the name of trying to include people. So what could be some examples of this? Lately, Disney has been promoting some particularly odd messages, such as with some of the Marvel films and the Star Wars films, like with Ant-Man Quantumania, or many of the recent Star Wars products, and even with like Peter Pan and Wendy. They make bold statements of women can do anything men can do, but better. And they go above and beyond the sort of girl power thing you might have heard from primary school. They go, these women can fight better than men, they can think better than men, they can do anything better than men, and men are completely incompetent idiots. Yes, even the men and even the boys, and if you question us, you must be some kind of misogynist. So that's obviously quite the extreme, but that's the route that they seem to be taking as of lately. So we can see that in like stuff like Rings of Power, even though even though Rings of Power isn't a Disney property, it still provides a good example of the character of Galadriel. Galadriel was meant to be this character that established these timeless virtues of the growth of femininity. My friend Malika Ganges delved better into that than I would. But they try to reinvent this character of Galadriel in Rings of Power, and then also to try to appeal to this group of people for the sake of relevancy. But it doesn't work like that, because the way they make Galadriel here, she just turns out to be a narcissist rather than a leader worth looking up to. And this is the kind of crowd that seems to think that nurture is somehow mistaken for passivity, but that's not the case. Everybody needs nurture, all of us. Like, that's why we have mothers. Mothers raise us up to be the best we can be. So that nurture is a major thing that's being overlooked by today's culture. And pardon me for a moment, because there's a friend I said hello to. Pardon me, I'll have to carry on from where I left off. So this whole extreme girl power message seems to extend towards other products like Disney's recent Peter Pan and Wendy production, where Wendy does everything better than women will ever do, and even boasts that the flying power belongs to no boy. And thinks of a life of independence and stuff like that. Even though it's kind of overlooking the virtue Wendy could be endorsing of nurture, the potential to look after others. And nurture is a very important psychological contribution to society. And to make matters worse, Peter Pan and Wendy also involves lost girls and lost boys. And it seems that, as I've been educated, that the filmmakers have overlooked the source material in the source material of Peter Pan. The reason why there were no lost girls was because girls were far too clever to fall off their prams compared to the boys. So the woke crowd has unintentionally, I think, made an offense towards the very kind of crowd they're trying to appeal to. So you see where I'm going with like this backwards messaging. I've had to pause the recording there just to say hello to friends and family, which again I suppose reinstates that whole point about the necessity for nurture. Friendship in a way is nurture, but femininity, motherhood, those I'd probably say are one of the peak pinnacles of nurture. And I suppose this nurture is kind of spiritually edified in a way by the scene in the original film where Snow White is praying to God for to keep the kind dwarfs safe and for Grumpy to like her. Oh, that's just so sweet. Pardon me, I farted. Yes, I'm going to admit to saying that on camera. I am mortal. I am human. I am Kalam. Anyway, the point I'm talking about is that there's other strange messages being propagated today. So there's been rumors going around of a remake for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, or simply titled Snow White. Now, keep in mind, this is at a day and age where mainstream Hollywood wants to be as inclusive as possible. Now, by itself, that doesn't sound like a bad thing, but the way they're practicing it is very questionable. Like, for example, I can understand that white men have been the leads in Hollywood productions for a bit too long. Like, that I can understand. But to the extent of trying to degenerate and to talk down to white men, that seems rather questionable. Or escalating brown-skinned people to such a high extent that you shouldn't even question any particular morally questionable actions that they might take in the film. That also seems a bit iffy. And we're living in a day and age where modern Disney especially has gone to such an extreme to try to appeal to these kinds of people. A lot of people, including myself, have become very disillusioned of the modern messaging, which seems to invoke indulgence more so than it does responsibility. And this is the main reason why people will love the original Snow White film, because not only is it a charming film, but it also enacts these virtues and values of responsibility. Now, of course, many would argue, oh, but this modern version of Snow White is all the more responsible. Is she? She's going to get 7 bandits to help her take over a kingdom, and she's neglecting all the things I've mentioned about nurture. Like, oh, but don't you understand? She's going to try to be a queen. Well, Snow White was already in a royal position with or without the original Disney animated version. What's your point? Like, let's face it, who would you want as a ruler more? A Snow White who would hire criminals to do some dirty work? Or would you rather hire someone who's sweet to even her worst enemies and would be willing to make a sweet pie if she had to, and also took responsibility to get you to wash your hands and to clean up your rooms? I know who I'd want as my leader. So, like I said, nurture is being mistaken for passivity, and it's leading to this utter contempt towards traditional feminine roles. And as a result, you get these so-called subversive female characters who are pretty much indistinguishable from men. But the problem is, this so-called subversive trope has been played into so many times in modern Hollywood. Like, it's to do so again would no longer be subversive. It would just be part of the trend. So you have the people trying to make the remake of Snow White saying, oh, this isn't 1938 anymore. This is a new version of Snow White. She's going to be independent. But as I've said before, she already had those virtues. So what's your point? But the main reason why people are getting up in arms against this upcoming remake is because of the whole race swap controversy, as well as the whole uprooting of the source material to the point where it's a completely different story. So Snow White, who is described even in the classic animated film and in the fairy tale source material as having skin as white as snow, according to the German folktale, she has white skin, and that's part of the story. But they've hired a Colombian actress with not so white skin to play Snow White. Honestly, I'm baffled as to why they even kept the title of Snow White. Like, that's not Snow White. It's like if you were to hire Colin Firth to play Black Panther. Like, what's with the double standard? Look, I get the idea that people of other skin colors need representation. I understand that, but to this extent. And oh, but that's not the most embarrassing part. Oh, no, that's not the most embarrassing part. the most embarrassing and downright shameful part of this production of live-action Snow White is that the Seven Dwarfs are no longer the Seven Dwarfs. Due to the ramblings of Peter Dinklage, Disney has been timid in their increasing need to try to appeal to as broad a demographic as possible, to the point of trying to be politically correct. But they've done this to such an extreme that they've replaced the Seven Dwarfs with 7 magical people. And it's just a like diversity of people. And, like, it's like they have one dwarf. Like, why not just hire a bunch of dwarf actors? In the name of inclusivity, you've rejected 6 other dwarf actors the potential to get a job and to be represented. And seriously, if you're that scared of offending dwarf people to the point they are, this is backwards logic. They are so scared of offending people with dwarfism that they don't hire people with dwarfism to be positively represented, but they hire one dwarf guy anyway. Like, what the frick? And even one dwarf actor, like, in an interview, has called them out for this. Like, if you're so inclusive, why aren't you representing dwarves? And in fact, if this is the length you're going to go in the name of inclusivity, why not hire a Colombian actress to play as Mulan? Huh? Come on. Double standards. Tyrone Magnus pointed that out. Because it's true. I mean, if you're going to go to that extreme, why not just go all the way with it? I'm trying to think. And not to mention, there's this whole notion of, oh, she's not going to have a Prince Charming, she's going to be her own woman. Right, okay, so let me get this straight. Sorry, every time I think of this, it's just so ridiculous. Okay, so in this new version of Snow White, Snow White is not Snow White. She is Snow Brown, which kind of sounds gross. Like, at least it's not Snow Yellow. That would have been embarrassing. So Snow White is not Snow White. She has played by a Colombian actress, even though Disney could have easily have hired an actual German actress to play Snow White, which would have been diverse and still worked for the film. They could even have hired a Japanese woman to play a Snow White. That still counts as white skin if you hire the right actress. That could still work. Like, they could have diversity and still stay true to the source material. They could make it work. So why pull off this stupid publicity stunt? And in the fear of offending dwarves, they don't hire the dwarves yet, hire one dwarf person anyway, and they say Snow White is not going to have a Prince Charming anymore. She's going to be her own individual person. Which brings me to something that the Critical Drinker pointed out in a video he made. And this is the saddest part about this modern woke messaging. Like, they virtue signal, but the woke crowd don't actually produce actual virtue. Instead, the woke crowd primarily focuses a message that's all about you. Not about caring for other people, just you. And in the name of you-ness, they've overlooked that the dwarves were caring and compassionate towards Snow White. So why get offended by the dwarves when they showed positive attributes? And in the name of inclusivity, they've completely neglected traditional feminine virtues, even the ones that were necessary to keep society stable for years, like nurture and cleanliness. That's Snow White represented, as well as purity of character. But that's completely absent. in this new version of Snow White, although they might have a few of those in there, but given the track record of where Hollywood's going these days, I highly doubt it. I mean, I guess I'm open to the idea that we could all be wrong and this could turn out to be something great, but I highly doubt it, because the messaging isn't about family anymore. The messaging is not about family virtue, it's not about nurture, it's not about the goodness of caring for others, it's about you and you caring for you. So whether they've intended it or not, these modern Hollywood people are promoting selfishness. They're not promoting selflessness anymore. And that's the saddest part about the Snow White remake. And that's the reason why the classic version of Snow White is going to stand strong as, for lack of a better term, the fairest of them all, as far as I'm aware. How would I rate the first Snow White film, I guess? That's a good question. Maybe let me think about that. How about a 9.9 out of 12? Yeah, I'd say that'd be fairly fair. Because maybe I should rank it higher. Or maybe I'm just have double standards, I don't know. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is that there's a clear reason why so many people still love Snow White and Seven Dwarfs to this day. And I enjoyed my time watching the classic Snow White film. I suppose I really enjoyed Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. There were some particularly humorous parts that got me to laugh, and like the shenanigans of the dwarves. Even the animals had their own charms to them. And Snow White is just, she's so adorably sweet. Like, how could you resist such a sweet personality like that? It's also got that timeless appeal that'll appeal to boys and girls and men and women. The fact that good is portrayed as very good and evil is portrayed as very evil. And traditional virtues and values are portrayed as a positive thing, and any form of self-indulgence to the point of willing to submit to the black arts for the sake of trying to achieve something is strictly condemned and has its consequences. You'll become like vulture food if you go down the dark path. Nom, 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 nom. And I know like people can like make fun of Snow White, and yeah, as long as you have good intentions, I suppose it's okay to like make fun of Snow White for some particularly odd quirks of like the fairy tale. But as of right now, I think we should be valuing Walt Disney's version of Snow White. Note that I said Walt Disney's version, not modern Disney's version. Walt Disney's version. There's a reason why we loved Disney to begin with. But sadly, for a lot of people, I think the golden age of Disney has come to an end. But Disney's gonna make a new animated film called Wish coming out later this year, and that looks promising. So I guess we'll wait and see. In the meantime, let me know what you think about the classic Snow White film. Do you think it still holds up in your eyes, or is there something you'd like to say in regards to the significance of it all? Let me know in the comments down below. In the meantime, Scott Stinker, signing out.